Hey, welcome to Creating Creators podcast. In the last episode, we sat down and talked with Aaron Wilhite. In that conversation, Aaron shared with us who inspired him. And that person is our guest today, Harrison Tarabella. Harrison owns a videography company called Tarabella Creative in Birmingham, Alabama. And today we had the chance to sit down and find out from Harrison how he got his start in videography, what inspires him today in his content, and just learn a little bit about his story. Check it out.
Well, man, first off, I just want to say thank you so much. I don't get to be on a ton of podcasts, so this is just a fun thing to do. So I'm very appreciative of you having me on. So
Yeah, I'm really excited to talk with you. I've been following your stuff for a while, and so I don't know who I came across first, whether it was you or whether it was Aaron, or whether it was maybe Dustin even. So I know that the three of you, I probably came across at similar times. I don't know which one pointed me in the direction of the other,
yeah,
but I'm thankful to be at least, I would say, influenced by all of your content. So. And let me go ahead and say, Aaron mentioned you as as inspiration to him in my last episode. What First of all, does that surprise you?
um,
Is it something that flatters you? How do you feel about him
it's
saying that you inspire
it's
him?
funny. It's flattering, but it's a little bit uncomfy. So Aaron, I think I got into video maybe a couple years before Aaron did, and it was when we were both in college. And so I think Aaron used to keep up with me on Instagram, and I didn't actually know Aaron because we went to different colleges. So I think at the beginning, Aaron definitely, I think, just followed my content. But now that, I mean, we've rented an office together for the past 8, 9, 10 months. I mean, I look up to Aaron in a ton of ways. He is incredibly business minded in a way that I strive to be. And so I think we've been good for each other, I think, in that way. Where I think I have a lot of creative drive and big ideas, but I'm not always the best at generating that into profit or business. Whereas Aaron can come a lot from the business world, and he's like great at his contracts and things like that. And so we've just been good for each other, I think.
Yeah, how is it sharing an office with him? I mean, is that
Oh,
do y'all ever get in each other's spaces a little too much, or does it seem to really y'all are
ooh,
pretty like cohesive together?
that's an interesting question.
Oh, we're about to get the tea on all this, aren't we?
Not so much. I would say we're pretty cohesive. Um, we are both here unless we have a shoot or one of us is traveling. I'd say we're both here 5 days a week at minimum. Um, I thought when I went in business for myself that I would have more free time. That's not true at all. It's actually been quite the opposite. But no, I think we complement each other very well, especially equipment wise. I invested in a lot of things like cameras and lenses, whereas Aaron has invested in a lot of like things that are actually useful, like C stands and lighting and things like that. So we're able to help each other out. We're not actually business partners. We run separate businesses. We just rent an office together. But it's the best way to describe it, I think, is it's extremely mutually beneficial, if that makes sense. But
Yeah, yeah,
he's a funny guy. We have something that we call couch time. I don't know if you can see it because of the depth of field I've got
yeah.
going on, but there's a couch in the back. And multiple times a week, one of us will just be laying down on that couch, contemplating our existence. Um, s- Aaron, a lot of the times, I have to convince him probably once a month that he actually likes doing video work. So that's always a fun time. But no, it's great.
Yeah.
It's great.
It's therapy. Y'all give
Yeah,
each other therapy a little bit.
exactly.
That's perfect. All right, well, let's move into the slides. I'm gonna try this setup and see if this way we can see the slides a little bit better, and we'll move back and forth between them. But, let's go ahead and move on, and you tell me, who is Harrison Tarabella?
Man, you did your
And I
research.
imagine you really enjoy this photo, right?
Oh yeah, that's great. So I that is a 10-year-old photo because I'm 27 years old right now, and I believe I was 17 when I took that. That was with my second ever camera, and I think it was the first time I had ever figured out how to no, what was that? That was with a 50 millimeter Nikon lens that I had adapted from my dad's old film camera onto my Canon 60D, and that was taken in my math classroom. So that's the story behind that photo.
Okay.
Um,
All right. I
yeah.
love the adapting glass so early in your career. Maybe out of necessity more so than
Oh, yeah, it
anything, but that's
wasn't
great.
because I knew anything about the character of vintage lenses, it was because that is what was available to me, and I did not have any money to buy anything else, so
That's great. That's great. All right. So tell us a little bit about who Harrison Tarabella is.
yeah, so I run a small production company here in Birmingham called Tarabella Creative, and ironically, picking out the name was probably the least creative thing that I've done in a long time. But yeah, I specialize in documentary and kind of outdoor content. Um, my two biggest clients, I do a lot of nonprofit work overseas, so missions organizations and things like that. And that's kind of that documentary aspect. I do a lot in Haiti and the Dominican Republic. Haven't been able to get down to Haiti in a while just because of the way things are with that. But that's kind of where my heart is in that type of content. It's I have a degree in broadcast journalism from Stanford University, and so whenever I do that kind of stuff, I it's nice to feel like you're using your degree. Not a lot of people do.
Definitely.
Um, but then the other aspect of what I'm hugely passionate about is just being outside. So another client that I have, one of my other bigger clients, it's called Storyteller Overland, and they are those like camper vans that it's kind of popular to like build out now and like off road in them and just live out of them. So
Yeah.
they're based here in Birmingham, but they build a huge volume of those vans. So my company does all of their video content as well. So that kind of scratches the two sides of what I love to do is it's like the humanitarian NGO work and then it's the outdoor adventure just running around in the mountains stuff, which that I think honestly that's what got me into filmmaking. I think everybody has a reason for picking up a camera. Um, and mine over time I think turned into I loved being outside and having a camera and being able to tell stories was a way for me to enable myself and my friends to get out and go do fun things. So,
Well, I definitely one thing that I've seen from you is a lot of what I would classify as almost travel type videos, and some of that I've seen as like personal content. It looks like, and then some of it I've definitely seen the storyteller overland vehicles. I was going to pull them up because there's actually something that I wanted to look at and ask you about because I'm a huge fan of something that you've done with them. I think relatively recently. So let me see if I can pull this up real quick. Here we go.
if I had to guess, is it the astronaut? Yep, yep,
Yes, yes.
yeah.
I think the shots you got with these, and I want to say, is there somewhere that I can see the actual photos themselves?
So the photos from this shoot were not from me. We had a photographer with us for this shoot. The video content is what I did. Um,
Okay.
but yeah, this was an incredible shoot. We Storyteller does a tour every year where I don't know exactly how many months, but they'll take their vans to all these different off-road conventions throughout the entire country. And
Yeah.
they came up with the theme of the No Gravity Tour. And it's based off of like, those like you ever pass a really retro van and it's like painted up with like wizards and galaxies and just
Yeah.
stuff like that. So that's where the idea came from. And they just named it the No Gravity Tour. And so I was kind of in a few meetings and I was like, man, how cool would it be if we did some stuff with like astronauts? And so then fast forward a couple months, they had built these custom astronaut costumes. I believe there's a girl on their team. I think it was Tori Riddle, but I want to say she made these and they look so good. Um,
Oh man, the shots with the LED lights that I've seen, where you had tube lights inside and underneath, like those shots look incredible.
Thank you.
Um,
Yeah, so that shoot, it was just for marketing. The objective for that was we were just gonna make a couple pieces for social media even. which hurt my heart a little bit because that meant I had to film everything vertically. And that
Oh,
it comes with the territory. But, all I made from that was a couple of reels for them, but I ended up loving that stuff so much, and I've gotten more comments from that shoot than I have anything I've done in a long time, which is funny to me because it was so simple. We didn't have a storyboard, we didn't have anything. It was just like, "Hey, let's go to Arizona, let's find a mountaintop, and we're gonna grab some people and put them in these costumes and just have them do" like, really just have them walk around and, like, drive the vans, and it was so cool. So that's one
yeah.
of my favorite ones I've gotten to do in a while.
Well, they're beautiful shots. I mean, just the whole idea, I think, was a great idea first and foremost. So props on that. And then I think the execution, especially like I said, I don't know if I just saw steel grabs. I'm sure I've seen some shots in your in maybe one of your reels that you put out
Yeah,
recently.
my most recent reel had, I think, everything from that shoot that I shot. So when I said I had to shoot it all vertically, I definitely snuck a bunch of stuff and shot it widescreen just because I
Yeah.
I knew that I was gonna wanna use that for other stuff. But
Oh man, it
yeah,
was beautiful, beautiful
thank you.
footage.
And
So
I
yeah,
can't take
props on that.
I can't take total credit for that. The team behind the team or Storyteller's marketing team is just very, very talented. And so it was everyone working together on that.
Yeah. Well, it takes a team, and definitely, I think your talent shined as well as theirs. So, so really great job on that stuff. Well, that's awesome. Man. I mean, like Harrison Tarabella in general, I think has just sort of caught my attention over the years. And Tarabella Creative, whether it's creative or not in the name, definitely I've seen some really cool things from you.
Thank
Let's go
you.
ahead and go on to the next slide here.
There we
Well,
go.
there you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Tarabella Creative. Um, I love. Tell me a little bit about this concept of like the geo. Looks like it's like elevation mapping.
Yeah, I would
Maybe
love
some of your
to.
brand in general. I would love to hear about that.
Oh, my branding team is gonna love this. So when I went full time, I've already had there's actually not a Terabella Creative website yet. It's currently being worked on. I
Yeah,
have
there's still an old Harrison
yeah,
Tarabella
yeah.
website.
Um,
Yeah.
and I've got the best couple people ever for marketing. And I had met them just through I feel like through like freelance world, you just get connected with the right people. But when I went full time, I reached out to them and I was like, "Hey guys, I know you do a lot of branding work. I just have this personal brand, but I need to file all this into an LLC that can still, it's still my last name, but it's not necessarily my face." Which is hilarious because the one you have pulled up is my face right there. Um, so yeah, they just went through and it's called Red Electric. It's just two girls and they do a fantastic job. They're here in Birmingham. And if you want to do a rebrand or anything for your company, they killed it. But they kind of just set me down over a couple of sessions and they looked at what I'm passionate about, the types of videos and photography projects that I want to work on and that I'm good at. And then they just turned that into a branding guide. And so the topographical map thing, there's actually meaning behind it. And they did such a good job of this. I didn't ask them to do this, but one of my favorite places in the entire world, it's called Ice Lakes, Colorado. I've made a couple of videos there. It's a pretty difficult hike. Well, I feel like people who live out in Colorado wouldn't call it difficult, but I would call it difficult.
Yeah.
Um,
People that don't live in that kind
yeah,
of
yeah,
elevation,
yeah.
people in Alabama would call it challenging.
But it's one of my favorite places on earth. It's actually the hike that my wife and I fell in love on. There's just a lot of meaning behind that location. And these girls, Ellie and Taylor, they drew that topographical map based off of the Ice Lakes geotag. And when we got back all the designs, I was looking at it and I was like, this looks so cool. And I was like, did you guys just randomly do this or did you base it off something? And they're like, oh no, we based it off of Ice Lakes. And it just blew me away, like the level of intentionality that they put behind
Oh
it.
yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of where that came from.
It's the little details, man. The little details that so many times people it goes unnoticed, but when you hear it and when you notice it, it just gives it so much more meaning, so much more grounding. So
Yeah.
that's awesome. Well, props to them on that. You jumped ahead a little bit on me, so let's go ahead and look at the next one. Well, I think we talked about a little bit of this. I just pulled some screen grabs from your Instagram in general. Um, how would you describe your work? I know you've already described a little bit the type of work that you do, like the type of clients you work with, but how would you describe your style of work? And
Mm.
I know you've done photography for a while. I think you started off with photography and then you did video, but how would you describe your, type of work or your brand or your style in general?
Yeah, absolutely. So definitely evolving. I would say 95% of my paid work is video. I think I've been lucky to be able to keep photography around as something that occasionally I'll make money with, but I still get to do it for fun. I think it's been a struggle for me as much as I love video, even if I'm doing it every day as a job, it feels like work. And so passion projects, I think when you do something full time, become a little bit more difficult, just because it feels like work. Whereas photography, I've been lucky to where since I don't get paid for that as much, photography still always feels fun and relaxing.
Yeah.
But yeah, my style of work, do you want photography or video or both? Because I think those would be different answers maybe.
Let's focus on video a little bit.
Okay,
I mean, I appreciate photography and I appreciate your work in photography. I think that's probably what I first noticed with you. But let's talk video because I think that's going to take us down the path we end up down anyway. So
perfect. So I would describe my video work. I love handheld. I tend to be the projects, a lot of the documentary stuff I work on. I'm very kind of fly on the wall. Um, I love long form content, and kind of like I said before, all of my personal work and the stuff that I get really excited about. I just want people to go outside. Um, and not to say that's the end all be all of what I want to do, but I think one of my bigger, I would say, kind of famous inspirations would be a guy named Chris Burkard, if you're familiar with him.
I'm not.
So he's a very established and talented photographer. He, I think, blew up on Instagram pretty early. Um, but just his work and the amount of he's a very talented landscape photographer. Um, but he's just incredible. And I think very early on, I just looked at the stuff he was doing and I was just blown away by it. And he does this thing where the people always tend to be very small in his frames, but then the landscapes are huge. And it does this really cool thing where you can just take a landscape photo and that's awesome. But having a landscape photo with one person in the frame, it really makes you stop and think about how big everything actually is. Because whenever you see a human, you're always able to give like context to stuff because you can think of yourself being right there. So I definitely took a lot from Chris. Um, Video wise, man, I've gone through stages. I definitely like when I was starting off, I wanted to do like the whole travel influencer, like Sam Colder type of thing,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
which is super cool and fun. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think, honestly, though, being a little bit older now, travel can just kind of wear me out. Like this summer I've traveled more than I ever have before, which is a huge blessing. But it's like, man, I want to be at home with my wife, you know. Um, so yeah, I think I love the travel content. I love the outdoor content. I can get into like the color grading stuff. Like I think I tend to have a little bit of like a darker color grading style, but I don't know if you want to go down that rabbit trail with everything.
We're gonna go down there later because I definitely think that's one thing that I know in my view of you and your work definitely stands out is your color stuff. So we'll touch on that in a little while. But let me go ahead and just because I want to get through the slides, but at the same time I also don't want the slides to drive me away from more of what you're saying. So I'm trying to prevent myself from doing that.
No, you're okay.
But
You're okay.
let me move forward and because you've already mentioned her a few times. So congratulations
Thank
on
you so much.
your recent wedding.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. It's
just go ahead. I'm
oh,
sorry.
I was gonna say almost a year and a half now.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I say recent. My wife and I have been married for 20 years
Yeah.
this coming up January. So I have to say recent, but I've seen a lot from y'all just on your social media and stuff. So congratulations on that.
Thank
Did y'all
you.
recently move into was this like a first house or is this a just a new house?
Yeah, so we bought our first house, like a month ago, and
Yeah.
we just did the move, 3 days ago, so it's really fresh.
Oh wow,
We're
wow.
still coming
Well,
off of that. Yeah,
congratulations on that.
thank you,
Yeah.
Brian. Yeah, it's definitely I'm sure you've moved before. It's not fun, but
No, no, I hate moving.
we finally feel settled, so we're grateful for that. But it's great. We were in an apartment before that, which there was nothing wrong with it, but first house is just exciting. So
Definitely. Definitely. Well, congratulations on that. That's huge. I
thank
mean,
you.
marriage alone is wonderful and challenging and sort of very flexing. It flexes you a lot. So that in and of itself is great. And then also the idea of having your first house together. That's awesome, man.
Yeah,
A
I
big changes in life. And with that, you just stated traveling more than you ever have before. So
yeah,
that
yeah.
probably adds a whole 'nother challenge into it.
It's a blessing because we are both pretty independent people. But yeah, it's funny, man. I know I'm gonna look back on what I say right now and laugh in like even a year, but I'm sure you can relate. Even just after a year and a half of marriage, it's so funny to look back on my wedding day and be like, "Wow, you thought you knew that person." And, like, I did. We were objectively each other's best friends on our wedding day, and we'd known each other for a very long time. But even a year and a half in, I'm just like, "Wow, we know each other way better than we thought we did." And I know I'm gonna laugh at myself in 5 years saying that after just a year and a half. So it's
Right.
great.
Yeah, or after 20 years,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, my wife and I, and something else I think I'm just going off of what I've observed via social media, being a little creeper here for a little while, but like my wife is in the medical field, and
Mhm.
I think your wife is also in the medical field, correct?
Yeah. What does your wife do?
She's a nurse practitioner now.
Okay.
She was an RN for years, and then she went to practitioner school, so she's a nurse practitioner.
That's awesome. Yeah, Abby is a ICU nurse, and she's
Nice,
currently in grad school for hospital administration. So
nice.
she wants to run a hospital one day. I definitely think she's got the right set of skills for it. So yeah. Do you feel like you've gotten a secondhand nursing degree, like being married to someone in the medical field?
I
Because
I don't.
I kind of like when we were first getting together, it's like she would be speaking in another language, and I
Definitely.
understood none of it, and now I'm like, "Oh, I can actually kinda talk shop a little bit."
Yeah, I don't know that my wife would say that I can really talk shop yet. We both, talk at each other a lot about what
Yep.
we do. And so just like she can tell you what she can throw out f-stop and aperture and well, those are the same things. But anyway, you get what I'm saying.
Yeah,
Like she
yeah,
can throw out all the terminology at times or at least hear it and be like, "Oh yeah, I remember him saying that." But then actually putting it to use is probably two different things. So Jennifer has she's worked in the NICU for years now, and
wow.
I'll just say this just about my wife: like it takes a certain type to work in intensive care, and even more of a certain type to work in intensive care with babies.
Yeah,
And she's incredible and one of the best at her job. And I think she should be in hospital management because I think she's got a great understanding of how best to run things, but she would never put herself in
yeah,
those kind
yeah.
of positions. So,
I tell you
but
what, man, it puts it in perspective, like, when I feel like I've had a bad day at work, I'll come home and Abby like, I'll be venting to her, I'm like, "My render was taking a really long time today," and she's like, "Yeah, I had, like, 2 people die," and I'm just like, "Alright."
yeah,
So,
yeah,
yeah, it's a different
yeah.
world.
And having children ourselves, there's quite a few times where she's texted me or communicated with me in some way. Um, you know, and it's sort of like watching parents go through loss.
Mm,
And definitely, like you're saying, it really puts into perspective, like, how can I complain about, this? this little tiny insignificant issue that I'm dealing with when I mean, literally her every day are many people's worst days,
Yeah.
and so it definitely, I agree. It puts things in perspective, not to mention it shows us incredible people that we've been fortunate enough to marry. And probably also points out how not so incredible this guy is. So, but anyway, that's enough self-bashing. Let's
Yeah,
let's
yeah.
move on. But seriously, congratulations
No, thank you so
on
much.
the wedding to both of y'all, even though it's a year late. So I apologize on that. All right, so tell me,
Oh, you did your research.
hang on, let me get this full screen a little bit more. Like I need to know what this is.
Wow.
And to be honest, it seems to be a trend with you. I stalked you a little bit on Facebook, and so I just want to give you an opportunity to write all of the,
Yeah.
you know probably misconceptions that are out there about you, and just tell us what's really happening here.
Well, there's no misconception about this. What you see is what you get. Man, this is hilarious. It's funny too. So I I've been growing my hair back out right now, and this is the first time in 10 years that I feel like I've had like high school boy hair. And
Yeah,
it's eerie seeing myself. This is probably 11, 12 years ago that I'm like, man, I don't look that much older. I'm probably 70 pounds lighter and I don't have a beard, but this is eerie. Man, I don't remember too much about this one. It's my buddy's horse because I grew up in Alabama, so a lot of my friends had farms. Man,
I grew up in Alabama, and my friends don't have horses, man. I don't know where in Alabama you were growing up.
um,
Sounds like Texas.
nah, just Baldwin County. Um,
Okay.
I gotta be honest, man, I don't remember too much about this one. The one thing I can tell you is that, that camera plate, I don't know if you can zoom in on there, it is definitely hot glued onto that glide cam. I remember that very well.
Let me-
Uh,
I don't. I'm trying to see. Oh, there. Okay. All right. So I can get full screen, but I can't go
yeah, so
larger than that for me. What are you saying about the camera plate? You're hot glued?
yeah, so there's was one screw that connected that camera to the mounting plate, um, and I remember it kept loosening because just one point of contact will always kinda just end up swiveling and turning. And
Right.
so
Yeah.
me being 16 or 15 or however old I was there,
MacGyver.
I just figured, "Hey, I've got hot glue, let's just pour hot glue into it," which, man, funny enough, I have a box of junk right next to my desk, and that exact glide cam is sitting right next to me right now.
Where's the horse?
Uh, I mean, probably dead, but that might be a
Probably
little
out
harsh,
to
yeah.
pasture.
Yeah.
Well, the
That's
horse
so
seems to be
funny.
working harder than the glide cam. I'm just telling
Oh,
you right
for
now.
sure. Yeah,
Yeah.
my
Yeah. And what
buddy
camera was this?
that's the 60D, and I
Okay.
think that's a Canon, if I remember correctly, 28 to 135 lens, which at
Yeah.
the time I was like, "This is the most expensive thing I will ever touch in my life," and, yeah, that funny how that goes, but man, this is great. I love this
Yeah.
research you've done.
Yeah, well, I mean, I saw this picture and I thought this has got to be something that we talk about. I did with Aaron. I asked him because there's a photo of him where he's wearing shorts and then he has like a button up shirt and a tie. And
I
I asked him, I was like, when in the world is it ever okay to wear a tie with shorts? And so he tries to explain that. I think it was some like dance he went to by himself.
Oh,
So
no,
if
that's
that's
even
if that
worse.
doesn't help the situation.
Well, no, that's funny, man. I definitely remember because back at that time, it was just like nobody had camera equipment. Like, I think a
Right.
cool thing now is that for better or worse, a lot of young kids are getting into filmmaking at, like, a way earlier age, and
I agree.
there's just more access to equipment and things than there ever has been before. Like, 16-year-olds and 15-year-olds now are, like, making thousands of dollars a month doing video work, and I'm like, "Man, I didn't see that until I was an adult." Um,
Right.
but I think, yeah, back in the day, it's just like anytime you were around cool looking camera equipment, you had to take a cool photo. And now, has that aged well? No, not at all.
The fact that you're describing this is a cool photo.
Oh, no, it's sick, but
That's
that's
it's yeah,
hilarious.
Yeah, it's a great one, man. It's a great one. Okay, so now in for real uh, question of this, like I want you to explain what this is because I remember seeing some behind the scenes of this on your social media at one point. I think like actually seeing some of the stuff being poured down, and these are still images from your videos, right? That you had done, and I think it's just it's sort of definitely creative, outside the box. It's just a beautiful image, I think, that you were able to capture here. And so, can you tell us just what this was, what it was for, sort of your process a little bit, just anything you're willing to talk about with this? I'm very curious to know because even whenever you did it, I wanted to know more about it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Well, you shocked me. You went from, like, my lowest of low to now one of the favorite things I've ever shot. I thought we were gonna make fun of me for a little bit longer.
I don't know if I
Um
should say you're welcome or thank or I'm sorry. I don't know which one, but there you go.
So this is still one of my favorite things I've gotten to shoot, and I have more with this concept that I want to do. I don't really have any like plans, but I just want to do more of this because it's so cool. But this was for a ministry that I used to be the creative director for, and we had to do this opener video for this huge student. Why did I just forget the word? Conference.
Okay.
We have this huge student conference we would do every year, and so we needed this opener video. And the voiceover, I forget exactly what it was, but I pulled it from scripture, and there was a lot about just like creation. All ministry videos tend to have some light versus dark narrative. That's just the way it goes. But I had the idea of like, what is a cooler metaphor for creation than like someone being painted into existence. And so I was just trying to wrap my head on like how in the world do I do this? Because I like the special effects world, but I'm not very good at it. And so I was
Yeah.
like, what's the easiest way to do this? And then I realized it's just a reverse green screen. So all I did is, and I experimented with this on this was in the middle of quarantine, and so I experimented on myself with this concept, and then the stills you actually have pulled up are one of my friends. But all I had to do was cover myself in blue paint, uh, specifically blue because human skin is orange, and so you have that whole, like, blue and orange color contrast thing. So
Right.
that
Right.
way, when you pull a key from the blue, orange and skin is as far away as possible, so you're not gonna get any, like, accidental skin in the shot.
And then you just reverse the key?
Yeah, that's it. So,
Okay.
the
That's genius.
and it looks so good because you can get super textured with it. We filmed this all with, like, a Blackmagic 4K, I think. Um,
Yeah.
and this one specifically, there's more of a pattern to it because then what I actually did is I found an artist and we just spent an entire day mixing paint together and filming that from overhead. And so after I had pulled that key, I just overlaid it on top of the footage of the paint mixing together. And it just made this really, really cool look where like the texture of the guy was like shifting and moving. So it was,
Okay, that's what I
yeah,
was yeah, I was curious because if it's just painting on the paint, then the paint would sort of stay put.
yeah.
But you're saying there was this texture on the paint and the texture moved
Mhm.
around.
So
Okay, that's cool.
it's much more of a simple effect than it looks like. The first one, the one that I did to kind of prove the concept, I literally did in my backyard with no backdrop at like noon and no lighting, nothing, just camera on a tripod, and I was just wiping paint all over myself. I had my friend film for me because I didn't want
Does not sound like a church video start. You know, it's
to.
like this is
Yeah,
something that's probably needs to be on your
yeah.
OnlyFans or something like
Oh gosh, but I had my friend film for me because I didn't wanna touch the camera because I had paint all over me, and I just
right.
remember just being like, "Dude, trust me, like, this looks beyond stupid and weird, but it's gonna look cool." Um, and it did,
It
and
definitely turned out amazing. I mean,
thank you.
just these still images alone look amazing, but I remember seeing I probably saw like a behind the scenes moment of it, but then also I think I saw some whether it was in a reel or whether it was like some type of little short clips that you put out. It looked incredible when I saw it, and it's been a while. Like you said, you started this back in COVID, and so it really turned out beautifully.
No,
And so
thank you so
I'm
much.
thankful to have the opportunity to ask you about it.
Yeah, the second one, so the one that this is, we actually did use a white backdrop because it just made everything a little bit easier to pull that key. But yeah, I wanna do a lot more with that. I just haven't had the time to think about it.
All right. All right. Well, whenever you need a second shooter this time, you just holler at me, right?
Right on.
Although I think at that point it's going to be even weirder, the whole like shooting it. So
Brian, we can cover you in paint whenever you want.
I appreciate that. I'm sure I have the body type that people would want to see covered in paint. All right, let's look at this next one. Okay, so I knew we were
Great.
getting back to it.
Oh, so this is why
We
you said there was a theme. Okay, okay.
Yes, yes. So the horses are consistent amongst your social media. It seems
Man, I
so.
used to ride
Um,
horses a lot, I guess. I haven't been on a horse in probably 7 years.
well, you're due. You're
I
due
guess,
because
yeah, and
your social
I
media
need to
fans.
bring my biggest camera and just pose. That's really so my dad took both of these.
Nice.
Yeah.
And who did the editing on the black and white there?
Oh, for sure me. That's when I discovered, Lightroom, and I was like, "You can desaturate every color except for one, and it
Yeah,
looks really cool."
of
Um,
course.
yeah, that's another thing. I think kids these days, now that presets are so ubiquitous and it's easy to kind of just follow people on social media and see what is, like, good, um, kids don't go through nearly as many of these trendy, horrible editing phases as I did, which that's another benefit for getting into photography, at this
What about the
point.
horse phase? Is that something that people bypass now?
It depends on the region. I think maybe I'm realizing in retrospect I might have been a horse girl, and
I can see that.
this
I
is
can see
this
that.
has been something that's now brought to my attention that I was in denial of, but
Yeah,
I can't
yeah.
argue with
Like I
facts.
said, you need to bring back the horses because your Facebook fans are begging for it. Okay,
Oh,
so
I
I
I
expect to
hope
see
so.
you on a horse soon,
Um,
maybe with paint on you.
so I've actually got a funny story about that bass guitar that I'm playing.
Okay,
I realized this, like, last week, so this is very recent, and seeing it now in a photo is really rubbing it in. I don't remember how I got that, and I have 2 guitars mounted on the wall next to me. I'm not a good musician at all, but it's just something that's fun. Um, I don't remember where I got that bass, but it was a 1970s Fender Jazzmaster. It was beautiful, and I must have scored it at a garage sale or something. Again, I don't know how I got it. When I bought my
it's like you
first
stole it from somebody.
Yeah, yeah. When I got my first full frame camera, I was 19, had just started college. It was the Sony A7 II. I sold almost all of my possessions to be able to buy that camera. I was absolutely broke. So I just started selling stuff that I owned to get enough money. I sold that base for what I thought was a great price, which was like $600. Brian, I looked that up a week ago because I was curious. Those go for $6,000.
And you still have it.
No, no, I sold it.
Oh,
I sold it when I was 19 for $500.
oh my gosh, man.
And I was the reason that came up is we had some people in the office and they were looking at a few of the guitars I have mounted on the wall. And I was telling them about this old bass I used to have. And I was like, yeah, it was really cool, but I sold it and I bought my first ever full frame camera with it. So, selling that bass really helped me launch my career. And I'm like, because of me selling that bass, I am now where I am now, and I can support my family, and I have a business, like, 10 years later, whatever. But I looked it up, and I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I sold that
That's
thing
painful.
for more than 10 times less what it is worth." So there's your story about that.
Now, do you think it would have been worth close to that even then?
Man, I don't know.
Or do you think it's more of a recent, like, surge in
I
those?
I don't know enough
Those
about
things don't seem to fluctuate in
Yeah, I
value
I don't know
much.
enough about, like, the used guitar or used bass market. to know,
That's not
but
the arena you live in.
no, no, I can tell you
Yeah.
everything about cameras, can't tell you too much about instruments, so,
Well, I know that's probably a little bit painful, but at the same time, like you said, it started your career where you're at now. So
yeah.
hopefully it's been more than just the money that
Oh,
has come with
absolutely.
photography and video. But in line with the music, so music is something that I think, according to Aaron, that's something that you and he both have some background in, at least. How do you feel that's really helped you in the world of video, and especially in video editing?
That's a great question. I think all of the best talented video editors I know are musicians. Um, I it just it helps you so much with pacing, with knowing how to cut to the beat. Um, I will never forget one of my friends in college, and I won't say his name right now. I was editing a project with him, and he was watching me cut the clips to the beat of a song, and he said, "How do you know where to cut?" And it was just, like, foreign to me. I was like, "What do you like, what, you just count to 4? Like, what do you mean?" And he was like, "No, but how do you know the spot in the music?" And it is wild to me that there are people who, they don't understand music at all. And I definitely think, and I won't be able to answer this extremely eloquently or well, but yeah, having a good understanding of just music and pacing, it really helps you with editing, especially when you're in situations where you've got to mix 2 songs together, or, you're playing around with sound design and, like, reverb. Um, the worst, which not worst, I actually think it's kind of fun, but mixing 2 songs together and you have to change the key of one of them, or, you kinda have to be a little bit of a DJ. You have to, like, find 2 songs on Music Bed where the BPM is gonna fit together, or, like, you need to transition from a song that's in G to a song that's in D, and then you just make, like, a pad synth noise and have it transition. So there's a lot that goes into video editing that I think carries over from the music world.
Oh yeah. Well, in my experience, unfortunately, I'm one of those guys that does not
Yeah.
understand music theory. Like, you say count to four. Like, I get that,
Yeah,
but at the
yeah.
same time, like, that is not my strength at all. Fortunately, I work with a guy that is very talented whenever it comes to music, and I see him editing, just like you're talking about with this guy that's sort of looking over your shoulder. I look at his cutting and just the way that he times the edit, and it amazes me. I think I've got enough of a knowledge to just make it, but not like do it as eloquently
Yeah, yeah.
as some of y'all are able
Well,
to
hey,
do.
listen, counting, you can make some money by being able to count to 4. That's all I'll say. As long as you can do that, you're set.
That's true, that's true. It just helps to understand when you're counting to 4,
Yes,
and that's
yeah.
my issue, is I still don't know, like, I can count to 4, but when to count to 4 would be helpful. So, alright, let's look at the next, image here.
There we
Alright,
go.
so this is yeah, hey, this is when I first came across your stuff. You were looking like this at the time. So, we're going through the evolution of Harrison Tarabella right now. So, but I do wanna ask you, just I hope that new creators, would watch this, and if they're watching this and learning from you, what advice would you have, especially considering? I mean, it sounds like you started pretty early on doing photography and even video, but what would you say to people that were just starting out, maybe even to yourself when you first started out, knowing what you know now?
Well, first off, you gotta get it on as many horses as possible. I can't stress that enough.
That's essential. That's
Essential.
essential. That's where I've gone wrong.
No, I think filmmaking and photography, it doesn't all have to be one thing. Um, like, a lot of I think I said this right at the beginning. A lot of people want to make movies, and then a lot of people want to be content creators on social media. Um, you don't have to do a little bit of everything. You can definitely make some money, and I'm not saying don't diversify your skills. I think I'm in situations all the time where I shoot stuff that, it's not, they're not all passion projects. It can't always be passion projects. You got to know how to sit down someone in front of a camera, light it, make it look good. Even if what you like is filming stuff outside on mountains, you got to be able to set up lights. Um, but find that like genre, or like find your reason why. For me, I think it evolved into filmmaking was my vehicle to be able to do things that I loved, like go backpacking, or like get paid to go outside, get paid to climb a mountain, get paid to tell stories of people in third world countries, all things that like you're actually passionate about. Filmmaking doesn't have to be I'm going to make movies in Hollywood, and it doesn't have to be I'm going to shoot weddings. It doesn't have to be I am going to do the travel filmmaking stuff. There's a million different ways to do it. I think the filmmaking market is really getting saturated, and I think because of that saturation, it's even more important to kind of zone in on a specific thing. And again, I'm not saying don't diversify. Like if you have opportunities to make money, don't ignore those as long as they're within your value set. Um, but like if you are really passionate and interested in cars and you're also skilled at filmmaking, there's probably not a ton of people who are good at both of those. If you're really
Yeah.
passionate about cooking, there's probably not a ton of people who can cook well and know how to film it in a really good way. So I think for people starting out, just there are different ways to do it. Filmmaking is not all one thing. Um, yeah, does that make sense at all?
Yeah. Well, I love sort of that whole idea of like find what you love to do and then sort of pair video with that. Like I think you've definitely found a niche that really works for you because you've got this like travel type style to even your own personal content, but then your clients are like travel brands. And so I think stuff like that. Basically, if you can match the brands that are your clients with the stuff that you are either interested in, knowledgeable of, or enjoy yourself, then that just sort of helps set you apart. That same coworker of mine I mentioned earlier, he's really big into like baseball,
Hmm.
right? It's like baseball is what he lives and breathes. So if he could pair like his video kind of work with organizations that are sort of connected in some way with baseball or maybe sports in general, that would probably be a great, sort of coexistence, so to speak, of his interests and then his work. So I definitely I agree that's a great tip. It definitely seems to be your story to some degree.
I also want to just for whoever's watching this, that might take a really long time, and that's super normal. I have been, I mean, I've been interested in video since I was 15 years old, and I'm 27 now, and I've been making money and I've been supporting myself with it, I guess, since like 2016, 2017. And I would say just in the last 2 years, I really started to get the clients that I dreamed of. And so it's not something that you just start and you're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have the clients that I'm thrilled about. Like you might have to take a year or two and grind out a bunch of weddings. You might have to take a year or two and take a bunch of jobs that you're not excited about. Like I take jobs all the time that, you know, don't get me super excited, but I know that I can do a very good job at them and help people with what their vision is for this other thing. So it takes a while. I have had a few friends who have gotten into video like within the past 2 to 3 years. And one of them told me one time, she was like, I struggle with comparison because I will like look at your stuff and look at my stuff, and my stuff doesn't look like your stuff. And I was just like, I've been doing this 10 years though. Like 10 years is a really long time. And so it's super natural. Like the way you pulled up those old photos, like me on the horses, I had cameras on those. My stuff now, I've been doing it for 10 years. So you just evolve. So I don't want anyone to get discouraged because they hear me say like find something you like doing and you'll make money. it takes a while. Like there is an element of work to it.
Well, speaking of just sort of starting out, how long do you think you worked, or how many jobs have you done? And I'm just throwing out a sort of, I don't need real numbers here, but talk about the amount of time you spent doing things for free or for really cheap, before you got those big clients. I mean, you said you've been doing video for 10 years, but you only recently went full time in your own business.
Mhm.
And even before that, how long were you just doing this as more of like fun side kind of stuff, not really making money at it?
Yeah, so, I mean, even now I do stuff that I don't make money on. I'm planning a trip out to Colorado here in the next month or 2 that I'm gonna sink, like, thousands of dollars into that I know I'm not gonna get back, but it's just because I try and do one really big personal project every year, otherwise I'll go insane. But, yeah, like, early on, I remember being thrilled at, like, taking senior photos for my friends for $50, or, like, I moved to Birmingham for college, and I got to do a job where I made, like, $300, and then the next one was 500, the next one was like 650, and it takes a while. And yeah, I for 5 years worked full time for a ministry. I already said that, but I was a creative director, so I was doing video professionally, but then I also freelanced on the side the entire time. And I
Right.
think that's a tendency with people who do what we do is even if you work full time for someone, it's tough to say no to money. Um, so yeah, you definitely just kind of build it up and it takes a while. Um, and I think for me, it was just a long enough journey of doing stuff for free, charging a little bit. And there's a little bit of imposter syndrome that comes with that, I think, because it's difficult sometimes to justify in your mind, like, why am I worth this amount of money? Um, Which now it's funny now because at a certain point you own so much video equipment where you can kind of throw that out the window and you're like, "Well, I own if I'm bringing this much, uh, like 5 figures worth of equipment to every shoot, then, like, I can charge a high amount and feel good about that because I have to, pay the credit cards." But,
Definitely. Definitely.
um, but yeah, it takes a while to get there. I I think I've been lucky to where I haven't had to do a ton of like the work for exposure type things. Um, and that's not ideal, but I don't think it's bad to do free projects because I think if you're starting out and you get the opportunity to do something really, really cool, um, and they're like, hey, we'll get you a ticket to get in the door. Like sometimes I would jump at that kind of stuff. I have more been on the side of there have always been things that I have wanted to make for me, and those are the things that I do for free. Um, yeah.
Well, I would say, like, what I've seen from you, just what looks like it's personal travel, is some of the most beautiful footage I've seen from you. And so I think I would imagine that the free stuff you've done, whether it's those personal projects, even though it's a lot of money and time invested in them, the payout is growth in yourself. I mean, the skills that you've gained, whether you were riding a horse or not, I mean, the skills you've gained over the years just on those little pet projects. A buddy of mine and my coworker and I just did a pet project. We did a little Grape Eco commercial. We didn't get paid a dime for it. It was just a little spec ad we did, but we learned so much. First of all, about what we're capable of, but also through trial and error, we learned, hey, this worked, this didn't work. We should have done this. Next time, do this. I mean, little things that over time that adds up to basically be to where you can charge thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars for what some people would have charged or what we used to charge $50 for.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that, the value in doing stuff for cheap or free, it's that growth. It's that growth. And we all go through it.
I would also speak to this, and I think my wife would say the same thing. One of I think my strengths and favorite things is I love just bringing groups of people together, and that's why I think I've loved the traveling thing so much, because there's nothing I like more than just picking out individual people who I think like, oh, these people will get along really well together, and then like going across the country with them and climbing a mountain. And I think a lot of like my early on like travel work, it kind of grew from that, because I was discovering for the first time as like a 19 through 22-year-old that there were other people out there who liked the same things as me. And it was kind of like those early days of like travel Instagram. And it was like, I found these groups of people that we were like, hey, we all like the same things, but we live in different places. And it was just really exciting to meet up and do that together. So I think I just love the idea of like collaboration. And so there's free trips, and I don't even want to call them free trips. I would say the uh, financially debilitating trips that I took back in the day when I was broke. I would just spend all my money on travel, but that's probably why a lot of people know me. And I don't have any kind of big following or even a medium following, but definitely the way that I have gotten a lot of the jobs I have are just from people being like, "Oh yeah, like I saw the cool stuff you were doing like 5, 6 years ago and I followed you and it's been really cool." And all that was is just me seeing people that were doing the same thing as me and wanting to be friends with them and go do something, have shared experiences together.
Yeah. Well, that's definitely some of the stuff that I remember first noticing with you is a lot of the travel stuff on YouTube as well as on Instagram. And let me go ahead and just put this plug out there. If you need a 40-year-old man with a wife and 4 kids and an annoying dog that you might be able to hear barking in the background right now to go with, a storyteller overland adventure vehicle, you just let me know
Right
because
on.
we're ready to go, man.
Heck
So
yeah.
usually the 40-year-old man with 4 kids, that already is like, we want somebody that the hair can blow in the wind,
That's right.
and I just
Give
yeah,
me give me a
I just
year and a
can't
half.
deliver.
Give me a year and a half and my hair will be down to here again, but it'll take a bit.
Are you gonna are you gonna have 4 kids by then?
In a year and a half, I don't think so,
Okay, all
unless
right.
what would the word be? Quadruplets? Unless we somehow land on
Yeah,
that,
quads. Yeah,
but
yeah,
probably not.
yeah. Good luck with that.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so we got another slide here, and this is what I was sort of getting into earlier. You mentioned a little bit about your coloring, and I'm going to go ahead and call you a colorist. I don't know if you would refer to yourself as a colorist, but the amount of intentionality, the amount of time and effort that I think you take, and even that I've heard from Aaron that you take in your coloring, is pretty impressive. These images that I have on here don't do it justice. These were just 2 images that I pulled just that showed a little bit of your DaVinci Resolve color, you know, um, spread, so to speak, the nodes.
Mhm.
But I just want to ask you a little bit. First of all, like, just how did you get to where you are in coloring, and sort of what caused you to pay so much attention to color? Because I'm a little bit like Aaron. I'm enough. I throw I mean, I use DaVinci, and I am shooting in log now, which I used to not. And I throw a what's it called, color space
Yeah,
transform on
yeah.
there, which he said that's pretty much all he does. And then I'll do a little bit of white balance correction, maybe a little bit of exposure correction. But then if I go any further than that, I just screw everything up. So tell me a little bit about your journey in coloring and how you got to where you are, as well as why you think it's important to spend so much time on color.
Absolutely. Well, first, I have to do my part and say I can't call myself a colorist. I am someone who loves the process of color and color grading more than anything else in editing. That's the part that I will spend hours on. It is absolutely my favorite, but I don't think I can call myself a professional colorist. I've done a few color jobs here and there, but I think if a professional colorist was watching this, there's so much about that world that I still don't know. So I don't want to call myself that.
I
But
get that. I
yeah,
get that. Well, I'll call you that
okay,
because
okay.
I'm not even in the ballpark of a colorist, so, you're more in that realm than I am.
Man, I just from the beginning, so kind of like when you pulled up that photo of me with it was all desaturated and just like my hair was orange. I have always just loved editing, even from photography and back in like Lightroom and everything. I just love the idea that like with a raw photo or raw video or log or 10-bit or whatever, that it's not a finished product and that it takes a little bit of your artistic interpretation to get there. Um, and also, I'm saying this as earlier today, I threw a color space transform over an entire project and called it a day. Because
I won't tell Aaron
yeah,
that. Does Aaron know you did that?
I actually don't know. I don't know. He's not in here.
Okay.
Because sometimes you don't have time. Um, I will always say my personal projects, there are no deadlines for, so I will take, like, months to do the color, and that's not realistic if you're paying me to do something and there's a deadline, that is not realistic, like, 75% of the time. Um, it's just fun, man. I think sound is objectively more important than video. However, you are watching something. Um, And usually within the first 15 seconds of me watching somebody's video, just based off of the color, the exposure of all the shots, you can kind of get a feel for what the quality of the product is going to be. And, that's not entirely true. Like, there's a lot of documentaries that they're super blown out and it's like a stylistic choice and the story is just so engaging. But especially for like the travel stuff and the stuff I love doing, it always used to bother me, and you hear this quote all the time, where you'll go to a really pretty place and people just go, "Man, a camera could never do this justice." And I think that is very true, but it also kind of offends me because I'm like, "Well, this is my job. I want to be able to do this justice." So I've always just loved color. With photography, I don't really know why I would call my editing style. My wife would call it dark and moody, but depending on what I'm shooting, I feel like it can vary.
She's not referring to
Yeah.
you
No, no,
personally
no,
as
no.
dark and moody.
I am the most opposite of dark and moody. I'm the whitest
Okay.
person on the face of the earth, and I'm pretty positive most of the time. But I I just love color. I think it's another aspect that you can actually tell a story is through the color. I could take the same scene. So that the shots you showed off were actually from that Ice Lakes video. It was the sequence of me and my Jeep driving around town as I'm going home to start packing up for this huge road trip across the country. And that entire video, I spent so much time on the color. Like, have you had a chance to watch that? You're not going to offend me if you
Yes.
say no. Okay.
No, no, I have. I
Okay,
have.
so there are a lot of shots in there that I color graded day for night. There's this entire sequence towards the probably back end of the video, and it's like as the sun is setting, there's this beautiful like song that picks up, and all the shots are like really blue and twilight. Half of that is just fake. Half of that is like midday, and it is just completely opposite of what it actually was in real life. But for the sake of the story, I needed it to feel like Twilight and I needed it to feel moody. And you can do that through color. Um, I think people what's the saying? It's like you write the story three different times. You write it once when you write it again when you shoot it, you write it a third time when you edit. I think color is part of that.
All right, so I got it pulled up here. It's silenced, but
Yeah. So this is a long one. Skip
oh, this is where you crashed the drone,
Yep,
wasn't it?
yep. I'm pretty notorious for crashing drones. Go to, like, the last third of the video. Okay, yeah, right it's right after this. So wow, you nailed it. So, this is funny, Abby right there, we were not even dating. So this video is very special to me because I accidentally filmed me falling in love with my wife, and I didn't know it. Um,
That's beautiful.
but
I mean, it
so
really is. That's an incredible story.
so yeah, all these shots right here, they look like they're Twilight, and some of them are, but especially the drone stuff, like half of these are from a completely different time of day, and the lighting is completely differently. And I just needed to be able to sell this moment in the story more. And I was going through all my footage. Like this is another one that didn't look like that. Um, oh, I might have misspoken.
We're catching you in
What?
a
Which?
lie here
Well,
in the
which?
video.
Hold on. Skip forward a little bit more because those drone shots weren't. No. Okay, go back. You might have missed it.
Okay.
Keep going. Okay, here, right here.
This section?
Yes,
Okay.
the end of the first day. So all of these drone shots, it was like very bright and sunny. So yeah, all of these I had to change the color on to correct for the time of day, make it feel a lot more moodier and darker because in the story, this was like the end of our first day on this mountain.
So, like this drone shot right here, you colored to be
Yeah, so
nighttime.
I pulled here, pause it right here. I pulled a key on the clouds because the luminance was coming through really bright. So I pulled a key on the brighter part of the clouds, pushed a ton of yellow and orange into that, and then the rest of the image I shifted to blue. So it really actually looked like it was sunset. But it was, it wasn't late in the day and it wasn't high noon, but it was definitely not what it looks like right here.
Did you do anything with this little tent?
Yeah, the tint came through on the key, because I was trying to get as much orange as possible, and so
Okay.
I definitely kinda highlighted the tint a little bit and let that shine through.
That's cool, man. I don't know how you do that without the image just falling apart. Do you see some of that where it really starts degrading and falling apart?
Yeah, so this drone in particular, it's an 8-bit drone. It was a Mavic Air 2,
Oh,
and
wow.
I
Yeah.
have always been shocked at how well the footage from this holds up, because I was
You
using this
shoot in
drone.
D-Log?
It didn't even have D-Log, it had, like, Cine-Like
Oh,
V or
gosh.
whatever they called it.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, I have always been so shocked at how well that this drone just performs, and the way I get around that is it helped me out in this instance that I wanted everything to look really dark. It's the same thing where you hear about, like, when people in movies try and hide bad CGI, they typically set the scene at nighttime. So, like, if there's a scary monster movie or there's, like, a superhero movie, and they don't have a ton of time to spend on the visual effects. They just set the scene to happen at nighttime, and then it's so dark that you probably won't notice the effects are bad. Um, that was playing to my advantage in this scene because I wanted it to look dark. So a lot of those artifacts or the breaking of the 8-bit footage that you would normally find, it
Yeah.
was a lot like you're not going to notice it as much. That
It sort of crushes into the shadows a little bit more so?
yeah. Then there's also things you can do with drone footage where you run just really aggressive noise reduction and then you also sharpen, but you selectively sharpen only parts of the image. So it kind of like tricks you into thinking that you're like, oh, this is really crisp, but it's actually super mushy. But the parts of it your eyes are looking at have been sharpened just a little bit. That and then 8-bit footage, you tend to have to be pretty gentle with. Everything I shoot now is raw, so you can do whatever you want to it. Um, and the rest of this video I filmed on a Blackmagic, so it was all raw too. But yeah, I got really lucky with that because that drone footage,
What
it's really hit or miss.
what do you shoot with now drone-wise?
Errands.
We're g say that oh, Aaron's
Yeah.
drone.
Um,
He's got the Mavic 3 Pro, right?
yeah, yeah, it's incredible.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
I went through a couple Mavic Air 2s because I kept crashing them. I have
I was about to say, does he know you crash drones?
I have crashed and broken 7 drones. Um,
Wow.
yeah, but my current one, I actually purposefully my last Mavic Air 2, I left in the Dominican Republic on purpose, because the organization that I do a lot of work with down there, their base, I've been leaving things at, like tripods, a few, like, lights, and then a drone just so that when I fly down there, I don't have to like pack as big of a bag.
Okay. All right.
I've
I
got
mean, if it's something, how often have you gone down at times?
so the beginning of this year, like January through March, I was in the Dominican Republic a third of the entire year,
Wow.
which
And you said not recently, like you haven't traveled there much recently, or you have traveled there a lot recently?
not there recently. I'm actually looking at going back here in the next couple weeks for a project, but that organization, their biggest like everything we film over the entire year needs to be ready by April because of this really big fundraising event they do. And so everything at the beginning of the year is like busy, 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 busy. And then April hits and then we kind of get to chill out for the summer.
I gotcha. I gotcha. That's it seems to work well, especially if you've got other clients. Like I know, well, in your work that you used to do with the nonprofit that you were on staff with, that ramped up during the summer.
Yeah,
I would
it's
imagine.
worked out very well because this is I've been describing it. It's like it's the summer of storyteller, basically. Like I have been so inundated with the van stuff this summer, which has been awesome and a huge blessing. But I really lucked out that my 2 biggest clients are polar opposites when it comes to, like,
Yeah,
when they need work. So
yeah, that keeps you busy all throughout the year, but not so busy at certain times to where you can't get anything done.
exactly.
Yeah. All right. So this next image I'm about to pull up. I there we're going to talk about some challenges and that you may face, and so I want to ask you about your challenges while also just sort of point out a challenge that I feel like I've noticed in your stuff.
Okay.
So I hope you're not offended by this, and I hope our viewers aren't offended by this. So first of all, so tell me about your biggest challenge, or maybe some more challenges that you have, or even more challenges, because it seems like one challenge that I noticed right off the bat is you really struggle to keep a shirt on
Mm.
in your shoots, and I don't know if that's just maybe location driven, or if it's more of like a Hulk out kind of thing, or what what this might be, but obviously I censored these because
That's
we're a
hilarious.
nip free content page here.
That's right.
Um, but
Not
this definitely seems to be a trend with your along with the horses.
well,
So
all of these that you've pulled up, I've been swimming.
that's true. That's true.
Um,
But there's other ones. There's other ones. It's just
probably.
those are the ones that I've got right now.
Well, no, I think it's a very, golly, man. I did the typical thing where I was always extremely unhealthy and skinny and just not making good food choices. My freshman year of college, I gained a lot of like bad weight. Um, and then I ended up meeting one of my now best friends in the whole world. He was this huge, like very strong, very in shape guy. And I just remember thinking like, wow, I didn't think people could actually look like you. And like, I don't believe that I could actually get there myself, I guess. And one of my probably best and worst qualities that has helped and not helped me is I'm extremely obsessive about like anything I'm interested in. I'm going to do 150%, whether that's good or bad. Which my wife has helped me curb that. But I
Definitely, I
kind of
can
just put
understand that.
a lot of that energy into fitness. And I think I've yeah, a lot of that is kind of the stereotypical story of just like people coming from a place of unhealth once they get, you know, very selfishly, they get like muscles or whatever you want to call it. You tend to just be kind of proud of that for a little bit. And it still is. I think fitness is something. I mean, I was at the gym right before we did this interview, but it's a huge part of my life. It's something I'm really passionate about. I actually think if I got a do-over in college, knowing what I know now, I would want to be a personal trainer. Like I love training people, like my friends who get into fitness and health. I I just want them to succeed. I love making workout plans for people. It's just fascinating. Like for the same reason I love cameras, I think there's a lot of like science behind cameras and editing. There's a lot of science and probably more so about the human body and physiology and how to like scientifically make an effective workout. So I could go on a tangent about that probably for 2 hours. But yeah, that's kind of the story with that is I just used to be not in a good place at all with my health, and now I am older, but I feel better than ever. So,
Well, and I pick at it just a little
oh,
bit,
and
but
you've got to. No, you can't be you've got to be able to make fun of it.
but I do think this brings me back to something you mentioned earlier about how you found something you're passionate about, and then your job you were able to sort of merge those together with some of the travel type brands that you work with. And I was just looking through your website, your harrisontarabella.com website, and I came across your about page, and you say in there, you say if you're looking for someone to hike 20 miles up a mountain with a 60-pound pack to get a 2-second shot, I'm your guy. Like, to me, I do think that even your fitness stuff, your health stuff, it's all sort of become a little bit of your brand, but also like that's what you enjoy, and it merges really well with the kind of content. And so props to you even on bringing that up in your about page. I hope in your Terabella creative, I hope you'll continue at least committing to be that kind of person for them if your clients need it,
No,
because I think
thank
that
you.
says a lot about you.
Thank you. That means a lot. And part of that description is selfishly because I'm like, man, I just want someone to pay me to do the stuff that I like.
Hey, that's what we're here for,
Yeah,
right? And
yeah.
and the thing is, there's clients out there that do need people to do that. I'm the 40-year-old guy that's out of shape, so I'm not the guy that they would throw a 20-pound, no, 60-pound pack and then up 60 miles up a mountainside. I would love to be that guy, and
you
maybe after this,
you can
you can
be.
give me the workout plan to
Yeah,
tell
yeah,
me
I would
how
love
to get
to.
there.
No, I just think I don't know who this quote is from, but it applies to every area of your life and my life, and I'm very guilty of not committing to this a lot of the time. But the quote is just, "It feels good to be strong," and you don't know that it feels good to be strong. And I guess a better word for that would be disciplined. Um, you don't always know how much better it is on the other side until you're there. Because I remember like in lots of areas, like I don't want to come across as like I'm the super disciplined guy. Like I've got a horrible morning routine. I sleep in pretty late. I'm not that guy at all. But I just remember thinking a long time ago when I was very unhealthy, I was like, that's not worth it. Like what that's all genetic. Like they're just born with it. Like it can't actually be that good. And now on the other side of it, I'll never be the strongest guy in the world. I'll never be the most disciplined guy in the world. I'll never be the smartest, the most talented, creative, whatever. But at least on the fitness side of it and other areas of my life where I've been able to implement discipline, um, it is objectively better. And I think that's something I can say with 100% certainty.
Well, the times that I have been healthier in my life, I definitely, you feel better. You, I mean, with my kids, I think of how much more active I've been at times with them, especially when they were smaller. I mean, just being able to be active more so is something that I think a lot of people, value when they're able to. Unfortunately, when you don't have that health, when you don't have that physical capabilities, and I'm still relatively physically
Absolutely.
capable, but when you don't have those, or whenever you start running limitations, it's like you think there's no way to get to that point.
Hmm.
It can be challenging, but definitely at the same time, like once you're there, like what you're talking about, it's amazing the freedom that you can find when you're able to move and even feel good. I mean, there's times where it's like after you eat something, you're like, oh, I'm miserable.
Yeah.
Well, if you'll eat healthier, you still get the energy, you still get the full feeling, but you don't feel awful after you eat. So
Yeah. And I'll
you
say
could probably
too,
go running afterwards.
yeah, fitness looks different for everyone too. Like I just so happen to enjoy lifting weights, but that doesn't mean for other people it can't be walking a lot or running a lot, or like someone could really really fall in love with riding a bike. Like
Yeah.
it's not at all one size fits all, and I think a lot of people will tell you that it is, But the key to being able to find something, like the key is you've got to find something you like to do. Because if you like, I hate running, and if that was the way to be healthy, I I would be dead. I just don't like running. Um, but it's just kind of like what I was saying earlier with video. It's just like find the thing that you like, and then you will like it, you know? So
Yeah, yeah. I mean, good advice in work and in working out. So I agree. All right. So we talked or I asked you about challenges a little bit, and I poked fun at your shirtlessness. But what are some challenges like? I mean, you mentioned earlier how you're not very business minded, but maybe that's it, or maybe there's something else. But what's a challenge? What's a big challenge that you think you see now in your work or in content creation in general?
it's absolutely the business side of it, and it's something that I've gotten better at. And I have a lot of people to thank for that, like being around Aaron a lot. Just like tons of people. Like my dad is very business minded. He's been able to give me a lot of helpful advice on things, and honestly, just a lot of making mistakes. Like a lot of having deals with clients that I'm like, oh, okay, the next contract, I'm definitely adding this.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
just you just get there. I was terrified this last tax season because it was like my first tax season where I was self-employed. And I was horrified that like someone was going to knock on my door and take me to jail for a mistake I made. Um,
Was that a knock I just heard? I'm sorry.
no,
That may have
well,
been my kids
now
upstairs.
that the IRS bought however many tens of thousands of assault rifles that they did, but that's neither here nor there. I won't get into that. But
For another podcast.
yeah, yeah, I yeah, the business stuff has been really difficult, and I think I just said that if I did college again, I would have done exercise science. I really wish I had gotten a business degree. Um, I got a journalism degree, and I love my university. My college experience was incredibly important to who I am today and just everything. But I I learned almost everything about my skill set from YouTube and just from trial and error. Um, I was in a very old school journalism program, and TV and that type of media was actively dying out and changing as I was getting the degree in like the old style of how to do stuff. So it it just would have been really beneficial for me to, I think, get a business degree. And I still don't understand, like, why are we not taught in school how to do taxes, and just there's lots of little things. So yeah, I'm growing in that. I'm continuing to grow. I feel a lot more confident than I was 9 months ago when I went full time. Um, but yeah, it's definitely something like we talked about it earlier. The idea of me just being able to tell someone like, "Hey, here's my price, and if you can't pay it, we're not going to do work." Because I think a lot of the times, as someone who's self-employed, it's really tempting and easy to go into this like scarcity mindset where you're like, "Oh, you don't want to work with me? It's okay. I'll lower my prices to get to wherever makes you happy." And it's like, "No, like you have worth." Like also me devalue if I devalue myself to a client and then they want to go next door to Aaron, they're going to be like, "Hey Aaron, how come you charge so much and we can get the same thing from Harrison for dirt cheap?" So it's not only devaluing me, it's like devaluing the people in my industry. So yeah, there's a lot, and I'm not a master at it, but I feel a little bit more confident now.
Yeah, I think the business side of things, whether it's the actual money side or the contract side or even the management side of it, that's stuff that like you mentioned the idea of like you wish why aren't we learning that in school? So many times it's hard to learn that stuff unless you're like in the meat of it, you
Yeah,
know? Like what you need is you almost need a teacher or a college course once you start dealing with that, and before that, I mean, if you were a student like me, you probably would have not listened whenever somebody taught you that in college or in high
I
school.
was terrible at school, man. Like
Yeah.
the whole C's get degrees thing, that was my college experience.
Yeah.
But
I was that way in high school and early college, and then I got married, and that flipped the switch for me. I was an AB student all the way through after that.
there you
So,
go.
Yeah, yeah. But okay, so now I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know we've already been on here for a little while, so let's get through some of this other stuff because I do have just a couple of finishing up kind of points. But I've enjoyed talking with you even already. So, but let's go ahead and move forward. Let's talk gear real quick because I know you're a Sony shooter. No, wait, you're a Black Magic. No, hang on, you're a Canon shooter, right? I imagine before long you'll be a red shooter. I'm sure you've already got experience at least
Oh, hold
handling
on.
one. Oh, are you going to go get it? Aaron had it like in the background, I think, of his.
Yeah, here you go.
Oh,
This is Aaron's. This
look
is
at
not mine.
this.
But one thing I will say, Aaron and I are terrible for each other is financially. Um,
You're like gearheads,
oh
both
my
of you.
gosh! Anytime like I buy something new and exciting, and then I convince Aaron that he needs it, and so the newest thing is Aaron picked up this red Komodo, uh, and I can already say without a doubt I'm probably going to have one within the next couple months.
Listen, I was on a movie set today. All right, because there's a movie being shot in Shelby County right
Is
now,
it
and it
the
was at
Matthew
one of our
McConaughey
schools.
one?
It is. It
Oh, right
is.
on. Did you see
So
him?
I did. I
That's
did.
awesome.
He walked down the hall. We were inside the building trying to find the somebody had to give us permission basically for the photos we took today for the school system. So anyway, he walked by. But anyway, we were there and I was geeking out over the cameras, man. They had two red V Raptors and they had one red Komoda and then they had one other like older red that all they were going to use it for was they were going to hook it underneath the bus.
Yeah,
And then
as a
if it
crash cam.
breaks, yeah, if it breaks, it breaks. Like they weren't even worried about it. I was like, "Hey, if it doesn't break, you can just
Yep.
leave it with me." So,
Well, so
but
funny thing, the Komodo was designed to be a crash cam.
right.
And it was just designed to be this little tiny box, which I gotta stop picking this up. Aaron's gonna be angry at me. Um,
No, no, no. You should just like for the rest of the shot, just
yeah,
hold it.
just throw it around. But it was
Yeah,
designed to be a crash camera because this sounds absurd, but it's a very cheap red. It's like $6,000 just for the little box, which
right.
for me and for people on my level in filmmaking world, you're like, oh my gosh, that's a lot for a camera. But for these movie sets where cameras can get with lenses included can be tens to hundreds of thousands of dollars, a little $6,000 box to just put on a bus and crash into something, that's worth it. Um,
What mount does he have on that?
Lens mount,
Yeah.
they come RF, and I
Oh man.
believe he has an EF adapter on it.
Yeah, but even the fact that you can throw RF glass on there, I
Yeah.
mean, compared to what a lot of these cinema cameras are now, I mean, that's incredible. And the fact that both of y'all, I mean, you at least I know have access to RF and EF glass, I'm
Mhm.
sure.
I don't own a lot of RF glass. I've got some anamorphics that are RF, but, most all of my stuff is EF because quite honestly, I mean, the RF lenses are objectively better and nicer, but none of my EF stuff I think looks bad, and,
Right.
to upgrade, it's like thousands of dollars more. So, until I break something, which I break things a lot, but I'm hanging on to what I've got. But, yeah, man, I'm a gearhead. My first camera ever was a Nikon camera that I won in a contest. Sold that, got a Canon camera because my dad had Canon stuff. So I was like, well, if I get a Canon camera, I can use all my dad's nice lenses. He quickly got
I
tired of
think when
that.
I came across sorry, when I came across your stuff, you were shooting the Sony,
Mhm.
maybe in the may have been the A7 III actually that I saw you with.
I probably would have been an A7R2. I skipped the
Okay.
A7 III. Um,
Okay.
but I think I have legitimately had a little bit of everything.
You start off with the worst of it, I would say. I was a I ended up starting off with Nikon, and I had horrible experience with autofocus, and at the time I didn't know anything about trying to pull focus. So, and then moved into the Sony world and been there ever since. But
Man, I tell people and us who are getting into filmmaking now, they don't know how good they have it. Like, do you remember back in the day that if you pointed a camera at a brick wall, the shot was unusable? just like the moire patterns, and
Right.
they
Yeah.
were like the old saying of, "Oh, hey, we're gonna film an interview. Make sure you don't wear a shirt with stripes." Like that's not a thing
Yeah.
anymore. Um,
I've had that with, like a checkered pattern on a shirt big time, a few times back with I think it was with the Nikon, what did they like D6400, I think
yeah,
was like the real entry level Nikon cameras.
mine was
Yeah.
a D3100, and I've wanted so badly, and I just keep forgetting. I want to go buy one on eBay and just play around with it, like however many years later, probably 12, 13 years later. Because, at the time I was like, wow, look at this camera. This is the nicest camera ever. And now they're going for like $60 on eBay. So
Yeah.
yeah, I love the gear, man. I think there are lots of things that you can work around. Not, you don't need a red. Like I do not need a red. Um, you do not need to go spend thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars to start off. Um, like story will always be more important than the gear you're working with. Like you've got to say all those things. But all that said, I just love the technical side of it. I think it's super cool how photo and video is like 50% just art and creativity, and then 50% like technical knowledge and like really, really in depth, just scientific stuff. And that just kind of appeals to how my brain works. So I could talk about gear longer than I think I could talk about anything.
I get it. I'm one of those guys that I've watched way too many YouTube videos
Yep.
about every single camera out there. And I personally own an A7 III and an A7 C. But then I shoot at work. I shoot on an FX3 and an A7 IV now, and I love the FX3.
Oh yeah.
I've really been a big fan of that. But I'll say that especially starting out, the most important camera, and I've always, or the best camera, I've always heard this phrase and I always use it myself, but the best camera is the one that's in your hands. And if it's just a phone, then that's like you're saying, the story, the framing and composition, the use of light, like that stuff is so much more important, and it transfers between camera to camera to camera. It doesn't matter if you are shooting on an iPhone or if you are shooting on a red, like the principles of framing, composition, storytelling, lighting, all of that still applies. It's just a matter of like a different sensor,
Oh
which
yeah.
I love the better sensors, but or the better glass that it's going through. But that stuff, I think if you can deliver a great video on an iPhone, then you can deliver a great video on a red, and
Absolutely.
if you deliver a crappy video on the red, I mean, it's still a crappy video no matter if it was shot on that or a iPhone.
Yeah, like if you, especially with how good phones are now, if you can't take a good looking photo on a phone, then no matter how much money you spend on a camera, is it going to help? Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you have been through a lot of gear over the time that I've watched you, at least. What is it that you're currently shooting with, and what really do you think has caused you to sort of settle on that, assuming you're not jumping to the red already?
I am currently all Canon. Uh, I'm actually using my main, so I have a C70 as my webcam right now. And
A
then,
little bit of
yeah,
overkill.
just a bit. And then I've got a Canon R3 as my like B camera, but also my photo camera. Um, and I love them. I came recently. The last camera system I was in was Blackmagic, and I had a Canon camera for stills. So Blackmagic was all EF mount, so I was just slowly building up a ton of Canon lenses, and especially when it was about time for me to go off on myself, I took a look at the types of work I was doing, and it was not work that was good with Blackmagic. It was a lot of like being in foreign countries for a long time or being in really rugged environments. And I still will say, I think the Blackmagic cameras make some of the prettiest looking video of any brand, and they are dirt cheap. Um, if anyone ever asks me, "Hey, I want to make videos, what do I buy?" I'm like, "Buy a Blackmagic camera because you will be able to use that for so long, and it's like raw video. It's so good." But the things it was missing were the things that really started to affect the way I worked. So the battery life was terrible. Um, there's no autofocus, which that's not a huge deal for me because I grew up on manual focus. I actually quite like it. Um, but it kind of just felt like the Blackmagic cameras were a really good sensor just in a plastic box. And that's the best way I could describe them. Whereas the
Mm.
Canon cameras, you have this pedigree of I don't know how long they've been in business. I think it's 100 years or more, but this huge history of thought and iteration that goes into the camera bodies. Whereas now it's at a point where you just pick it up, and if you've never picked up a camera before, you know where to put your fingers, you know how to work it. The C70, I only own 2 batteries, and I have never done a shoot where I've used both of them. So
Wow.
same thing with the R3. It takes these huge batteries. So I kind of just took a look at like what I needed. Because my Blackmagic, I'd rigged it up, man. Like it had the rail system. I had the big V mount batteries. Kind of like this Red. Like that's one of the reasons I don't have a Red yet is you turn this camera on and it takes 30 entire seconds to turn on so that you can shoot. And a lot of the stuff I do, man, I'm like in the back of a car and I see a shot and I just have to jump out and start filming.
Yeah.
Or like if I were to go backpacking with a Red, like I could. And, you know, if I end up buying one, I'm sure that's going to be a situation that I put myself in. But having to pack with me like 4 V mount batteries versus 4 really small batteries that will last me longer. Um, so for me, it was just Canon was the right tool for the type of work that I'm doing right now. The image out of it is gorgeous. Like the C70, Aaron will fight me on this. The C70, I really looked into it. It's got more dynamic range than the Red Komodo, just because of the way the sensor works. And both of really the biggest things for me were my cameras have to be able to shoot raw video. They have to be basically indestructible because I'm really tough on my things. I needed good audio, and this has XLR, and then the battery life had to be like awesome. So Canon really checked those boxes for me. Sony is great. I shot on Sony for like 5 years, but
Right.
I would probably still be with them if they had come out with the A7S III faster. What made me jump ship to Canon was Sony took so long releasing the A7S III that I was just like, it's never going to come out. I'm just switching to Canon. So
Would you be on the FX3 at this point if it had come out?
I think so. Aaron's got an FX3. I have color graded and used a lot of footage from the FX3 and from the A7S III, which they're the same camera. Um, and it's really, really good. Like I have nothing bad to say. The only thing is I am unfairly partial to raw video, and to my knowledge, the Sony cameras can't internally shoot anything raw. I
No, no.
and I
Only externally through the Atomos, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's a big reason with me loving the color and everything and like spending so much time in the color grade. I just shoot everything raw because you just get so much more flexibility with it. And you don't need that.
Does
You
the
don't need I would say 10-bit video is a great baseline. Even 8-bit. Like I did a lot of paid work that was 8-bit video. And if you know how to light stuff, you're fine. I just really like the raw video.
does the R3 record internal RAW?
Yeah. So wait, let me grab
Oh,
that.
wow. I didn't know the R3 did that. Oh,
So
now we get to see the studio a little bit.
so this is a pretty cool thing. So here's the R3. I'll put it right there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
It takes I can run it all day off of 2 of these batteries. It can shoot 6K raw video at 60 frames a second.
And it's full frame? It's
It's
like the
Yeah,
1DX,
it's
right?
full frame. This Red Komodo cannot shoot 6K past 40 frames a second. or there it is. So there are huge pros to the Red. The Red's image is objectively a little bit better than the R3, and the R3 you also don't get a lot of the video controls. I made a whole video about this, but this R3 is essentially it is a similar image to what you would get out of the Red, and it weighs nothing. I keep losing track of where my screen is.
Sorry, I'll put you
No, you're
full
good. You're
screen.
good.
How about that?
It weighs like literally nothing. It is small. I don't need any accessories, and it just works. So for a lot of the documentary and travel stuff, I'll bring this R3 with me. And the C70 is my A cam for sure. The C70 is way better at video than the R3. But it it would just be really difficult that if you told me, hey, I want you to go climb a mountain and make a documentary, uh, for me to pick this over this. Um, because again, with that thing on my website where I say I'm going to climb up a mountain with a 60-pound bag on my back, I would like the bag to be a lot lighter than 60 pounds. So a lot of like the weight does matter for me. So that's kind of why I'm with Canon right now. And you know what? If you catch me again in a year or maybe even 6 months, I might be on something different. But for now, I'm Canon.
Well, I think nowadays you really can't go wrong with the cameras
Oh, I
that
agree.
are available out there. I will say Canon has always had beautiful colors. Their autofocus, which you said it already that you're not dependent upon that, but their autofocus is something very reliable, dependable, and beautiful most of the time. Just the way that it almost naturally racks focus. Um, I mean, Canon's always been great. I wanted a Canon whenever I first looked at buying a camera. I wanted the 1DX. I couldn't afford the 1DX. So then I looked at the what was it? The 5D Mark IV that everyone was using at the time. Well, I couldn't afford that either. So then they had just come out with the 6D Mark II, and I was like, oh, this thing's about $2,000. It was about the top end of my budget, and all of a sudden, Sony I caught wind of Sony. I hadn't even looked at anybody that was shooting Sony, and so I came across the A7 III that had sort of not just come out, but relatively had just come out. I think it maybe had been out for probably less than 6 months. And so I found out, man, I can do 120 frames per second. I can do 4K at 24 uncropped. There were all the stuff, but even then, it wasn't the same look as what you could get out of a 1DX in a lot of ways. But for me, it was perfect. For me, matter of fact, I've got mine right here. It fits in the frame a lot
Yeah, there
easier
you go.
than yours. But anyway, this camera here has been. I mean, it's what's gotten me where I'm at right now, able to do video full time because of that camera. I would say in a lot of ways.
That's
So
awesome. Yeah, I actually just I contracted a guy to go to the Dominican for me like 2 weeks ago, and he shot everything on an A7 III. And I was actually editing the footage from that all yesterday and this morning. And the entire thing, I was just like, man, this is a really good camera.
yeah, yeah. It still like not long ago, I picked that up, which I don't pick it up very often. It usually sits on my desk now. I've got my A7C that I'm shooting with currently. But I pulled up some footage that I shot with the A7 III, and man, something about the colors. To be honest, I actually enjoyed it more than the A7C, and even more than the A7 IV because
Really?
the A7 IV they've shifted some colors around. Now, don't get me wrong, the FX3 I love to use, and the A7 IV I love to use, especially now that they've got S-Log 3 that you can actually because it's 10-bit.
Yeah.
But there's something about, and maybe it's just because I'm used to it and it's more comfortable for me. But to go back to the footage of the A7 III and see something about the greens and the magentas, like I actually prefer the shift, which I think is a little more green with the A7
Hmm.
III than I get with this is a really heavy magenta shift. And even with the FX3, I get that.
I forget which camera it was, but I think when Sony came out with the A7R4, they because everyone has always complained about Sony's colors, and I personally don't understand that complaint because I think one, if you know how to color grade, just make it look like what you want to look, and
Right?
two, I'm like, these billion-dollar companies are gonna be better at knowing how to represent color than I am, you know? Like, whatever Canon's picture looks like, whatever Sony's picture looks like, whatever even, everyone hates on Nikon, but, like, they have been around for such a long time, and I'm like,
Yeah.
I'm sure they know what they're doing, you know? But
I think Nikon is beautiful. I just their autofocus, and I think now it's caught up, but their autofocus was always really painful for me. And
oh,
I'm
yeah.
one that relies on autofocus. I do a lot of event coverage, and so autofocus saves my tail most of the time.
Do you ever have
So
people ask you, like, "What camera should I buy?"
all the time,
What's your answer? Because I feel like everyone has a different answer for that. So if I knew nothing and I just said, "Hey, what camera should I buy?" What would you tell me?
well, what you said earlier with Black Magic, I agree with what you get for the money. I mean, definitely, but I rely on autofocus so much, and I think new people rely on autofocus. I typically send them in the direction of Sony, and if budget is an issue, I typically recommend the A7C. The
Okay.
A7C, I think, is one of the for first, especially in the world. I work in school PR, so like we're going in classrooms, we're taking video of events. I prefer to be a fly on the wall. The A7C is a small, compact camera. I shoot primes mostly, so an 85 or a 35 or even a 20. And so those are compact. You got a little tiny camera, small lens. It sort of disappears in a lot of ways. And so that's usually, plus you got the flip out screen, like I can see myself on the camera right now, which the A7 III did not have. It's got some limitations, but I would say overall, to me, for the money, the A7C is probably one of the best cameras, especially for entry level.
How much does that go for?
You can get it. I think brand new, it's like
Okay.
1,800, but you can probably find one for 12 to 1,000, probably somewhere in that range.
Man, so I it's it's always great when I'll have 2 types of people who ask me that question. And they'll say, "Hey, I wanna get into photo and video. What should I buy?" And so I immediately ask, "What's your budget?" And they always will be like $500. And you're like,
It's like,
there's nothing
stick with
wrong
your
with that,
iPhone.
but I'm just like, there's not a lot. But I have probably sold like 12 A6300s,
Oh, wow. Yeah.
A6300s and A6000s. Um,
Ah, man, those are okay. You're like those pain me because again, the battery
yeah.
and the
Well, there's a
autofocus.
lot of limitations with them, but I used to have an A6300, and I'll just tell people, I'm like, okay, you have $500, so that means we're getting you something off eBay. And then they also say they're like that $500 needs to get me a lens. So
Oh
I'm
yeah,
just like,
yeah.
yeah, we got to buy used. So like Sony should sponsor me because I seriously think I have sold like 12 of those cameras. Um,
I don't know that 12's enough for them to sponsor you, but I still think they should sponsor you
yeah,
for various
especially
reasons. But
secondhand off eBay. But
yes, that's making them so much money.
I had someone the other day who was like, "Hey, I wanna buy a camera." And so, I text back, I'm like, "All right, man, what's your budget?" And I'm fully expecting them to say like $600. And he's like, "Oh, I can spend about $4 to $5,000." And I'm just like, "Oh my gosh." I'm like, "We can do so much here." And I ended up I forget what we went with. It was like a Canon R6. And so we ended up saving him a lot of that money because, like, please don't invest $5,000 into your first ever camera. But
No, no. I think you need to learn a lot of skills before you really invest. Glass is more important.
yeah,
What do they always say? You date the body, but you marry the glass.
yep.
I mean, that's a big thing that I think you can grow with the glass. But ecosystems matter. Like, are you going with Canon? Well, for most people, for you it doesn't because you change ecosystems. It seems like every few years.
Well, so what I tell people honestly is you said this earlier, you can't go wrong with any of them. Like even Nikon now, Nikon's brand new cameras, like autofocus
Yeah,
is
the
great for
Z9
video.
I've heard is
Yeah.
wonderful.
Probably don't buy a Z9 as your first ever camera,
No.
but legitimately, you can't go wrong. So what I just tell people is I'm like, "Hey, if you have friends who are doing this, whatever brand your friends use, get the same thing." Because then at that point, they can share stuff, they can share lenses, If your friend is more established and they've got like nicer equipment than you can try out their stuff. And it just makes it way easier. Whereas if all your friends shoot Canon and you get into it and you get Nikon or Sony, you would just feel a little bit isolated, I think.
That's really good advice. I think the idea of sharing and swapping back and forth and even like helping each other out. I mean, even just second shooting with somebody, the idea that your camera would match and color grading would be a lot easier. That's good advice. Find the friend that you're closest to that y'all can sort of grow together, get the same brand as them, and hold on for the ride.
Yeah. Man, I had a guy, I don't do weddings ever, unless it's for like close friends. And so I had one that I was photographing about a year ago, and it was for a really close friend. And I found this guy to second shoot for me, and he did an incredible job. But he shot all Fujifilm, and so I was shooting Canon,
Ooh.
and it was a like his photos were phenomenal, but like man, getting those to look the same was pretty tough.
Was it one of these Fujis that have like the baked in looks?
So he shot it's even worse. He shot Sony and Fuji. He shot
And you were
primarily
shooting Canon.
yeah, which it was all fine, you know, like, I even used my presets on it, and my when I built my presets, I was shooting all on Sony cameras, so I'm really familiar with how the Sony colors work, but it was just hilarious because I would have photos from, like, the same scene or the same moment, and like Canon stuff is all super magenta, very warm. You have to expose it a little bit on the brighter side, and then I feel like all Sony shooters tend to underexpose because you get the better dynamic range that way. And then the Fuji stuff would just look crazy because he was shooting it baked in with like those film profiles, so it
Yeah,
it
yeah.
looked it looked really cool. But I was just like, man, this is a pretty eclectic gallery I'm about to deliver.
Was it the X what is it? The XV100 everyone's, like,
It was
hunting down
It
now?
was one of those. I don't exactly
Yeah,
remember which one, but it was like you
yeah,
couldn't take the lens off, but it was a
yeah,
phenomenal like, the photos out of it were really good, and that's more to his talent than the camera, but it was just
yeah.
funny being
My
like, "I am matching 3 different things right now."
That's my coworker, Cole is his name. Cole, he has he just got the Fuji XV100 and not long ago, and it's beautiful images. Matter of fact, we have behind the scenes photo from our Grey Pico
Mm,
spec ad that that were shot on that camera, and they look incredible, especially because it was like a vintage scene anyway, and so then we got this vintage sort of baked in look.
that's awesome.
Speaking of vintage, check this out right here.
Oh, wait. Okay, that's awesome. Is that like a no, it's not a brownie. What's the brand of that? I can't see
So
any.
it's Bell and Howell,
That's
and
awesome.
this is an old film camera, and I recently bought some film for it, and you have to buy like the way I bought it is it includes the film and it includes the developing and digitizing of the film. I just finished like yesterday finished shooting the last bit of this because it's 25-foot rolls and you shoot at one side, you flip it, send it back through, and shoot the other side. And it's 8 millimeter is what the film is, and then it ends up being like 2 minutes on one side and 2 minutes on the other.
That's
So a total of
awesome.
4 minutes of footage,
Wow.
and it. I look forward to seeing it. So I haven't developed it yet. It's still in there, but it's done. It's got like a little meter here on the side, and that meter's full. So now it's time to get it out, send it off, and have it developed and digitized. But
That's
I'm
super
looking
cool,
forward
man.
to it.
I
Yeah.
bought a little film camera, and I've had a few here and there throughout the years, but my most recent one was a dud. I bought this little Canon rangefinder because I wanted to be able. I tend to color grade a lot of my stuff to look like Portra 400 right now, and I had the idea of like, what if I just take this little film camera with me to all my sets? And as I set up my A cam, I just grab a little film shot that is actually Portra 400. And then I can develop that, bring it back in, and use that for reference as I'm color grading so that I can know I'm
Yeah.
exactly right. And then the rangefinder I ended up getting was completely broken. So I have that idea in the back of my head. I just need to buy a new camera.
Yeah, yeah. Well, this is something I bought for like a shelf decoration for my
It looks
office. Is
awesome.
right. Yeah, it's a beautiful camera, but, then I was like, "You know what? I wanna get some film for it." The issue is like the aperture. I don't know if you can well, if I put it in front of my
Yeah, there
face,
it
but
goes.
this is the aperture wheel, and the way you have to set it is you sorta set it, it's got like this little thing on top you press to tell you like it's almost like a light meter, and so then it tells you what aperture to set. Well, I don't even know how this thing works, but I think it's set for 40 speed film.
Interesting.
And what I bought was 100 speed.
Yeah.
And so this meter doesn't even go up to 100. So I don't know. Anyway, I may have overexposed every bit of it and it's all ruined,
No,
but it's going to cost me a
that was an
do what?
artistic choice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Exactly. I like all white.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but anyway, that's my this is my new camera
That's
that I
cool,
just,
man.
you know,
I
but
love that old stuff like that. That's awesome.
the camera cost me $30 and the film cost me for developing and everything for 4 minutes,
Oh my
$150.
gosh. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So if it goes really bad, you'll never see anything of it, but hopefully it'll go good. All right, let's wrap this up a little bit. I want to know what's next for you. I'm going to progress forward a little bit,
There we go.
and I want to know who inspires you. And this one, you like that photo?
I love
You've
that
got
one.
some great photos out there, man. I mean, you've been
I
doing this for a while, so
yeah, I have a lot of friends who know how to take photos and make my dumb face look well, that photo's kinda cringy, but they at least it's a good photograph.
well, tell me though, tell me a little bit about what's next for you. I mean, I know you've really recently begun Tarabella Creative. You said you're still working on the website, but what's next for you? What are some hopes, some aspirations? And then also, we'll get to this question about who inspires you, because hopefully that's going to sort of pivot the next episode for us. So go ahead and tell me a little bit what's next for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am finally in a position where I feel like so the way I started working for myself full time, it came about very suddenly. I don't need to go into all of it, but the job I was working at ran out of money, and with like super, it was a tech startup, and so with super short notice, I was like, okay, let's do this thing. Like, let's actually go full time on my own. And it had always been something I had been thinking of, um, and it's just scary. So after like 9, 10 months, I finally feel like I've got my feet on the ground. And I don't want to say I know what I'm doing, but I feel comfortable with the amount of work that I have. So I'm currently in a stage of looking for my business. We're in the business of locking down retainer clients. So I will take random one off jobs, but I like to find companies that I can really just get behind who they are as a business. And then we partner together on a contract basis. So I'm currently seeking out more of those. And the really big what's next will be I have a few leads, but if I can lock down one or more of those, I'm ready to start growing my business, which is horrifyingly scary. Just the idea of being responsible for another person or another person's income, it's genuinely terrifying. But that's the next thing I need to do to kind of grow. I don't want to be in the day to day of this for the rest of my life. I want to be in a place where I can have an editor that I really trust. I have a team of people that I can really trust to go out and shoot some things. So that's kind of what's next. It's just bridging that gap to kind of building a team, I guess. So I don't know what that's going to look like. I don't know when that's going to happen, but that is currently what I am seeking out.
Nice, nice. Well, I mean, I think that's something I hear. I've heard something similar from Aaron. Is like it feels like the way to grow is really to sort of like multiply yourself to some degree,
Yeah.
and therefore it's like you got to give up a little bit of trust, and that's tough, especially somebody that puts as much time into coloring as you do. As well as I'm sure the storytelling. You mentioned audio. I'm sure that audio or sound design is a big part of your work also. So giving some of those kind of controls up is going to be I can imagine a challenge. But at the same time, if you can and you can find the right people, that's going to be huge for your business.
Yeah, and, like, I've been so fortunate, like, I wanna shout them out again, the girls who did my rebrand, Red Electric Studio. I have been working with them more and more, and, like, they're extremely talented, and so those are it's just finding people that I like to surround myself with creatively. Like, Aaron is one of those people. You mentioned sound. Aaron is to sound, I think, what I am to color. So for a ton of projects, I will kick my sound across the room to Aaron, and he'll fix it, and vice versa. So, yeah, it's fun.
Nice, nice. All right, so this question again about who inspires you. Like, what would you say somebody that currently in your life that really inspires you to maybe seeing their work, maybe causes you to sort of work a little harder, or even seeing their content just makes you go out and maybe create some of those personal content things that you've alluded to?
Absolutely. So are you familiar? They're here in town, Cedar Creative.
I am. I
Yeah.
have. I've come across their stuff on social media. They've got some beautiful content.
So I genuinely think that the stuff they put out is the best stuff out of Birmingham. They are just incredibly talented. So one of the guys who I don't know exactly the structure, so I don't want to call him the founder or anything, but I know he's one of the original members. I actually interned for him when I was in college, which is funny because he's not that much older than me. I think when I interned for him, he was younger than I am right now, which is really funny to think back on.
Wow.
But yeah, his name's Ethan Milner, and really just all the guys at Cedar. There's a guy I went to school with named Grayson Welch, who, when I say like I'm not a colorist, Grayson is a legitimate colorist. Like I'm pretty sure has colored like Super Bowl spots. They just do incredible work. And there's more on that team than just the two of them. But yeah, I everything they put out, I just look at and I'm like, wow, I need to like step my game up. They are so talented.
Yeah, I'm looking at their website right now. Cedar Creative, right?
Yep.
This is them.
Yeah. It's so good.
Yeah, their stuff looks incredible. I mean, just the richness of the colors.
So I'll tell you what,
I
if you want to talk to somebody, they will not want to talk to you about gear at all. They will talk about storytelling for 3 hours straight. And I that is incredible and so cool. And if you watch any of their pieces, that just like you understand.
Yeah, I recently watched one of their pieces that they released on social media. It was like I think it was like an adoption agency,
Mhm.
maybe, or a
For
foster. It
I
was
think
foster care. That's what it was.
Alabama Children's Home or something like that.
Yeah, and it was such a beautiful story. Oh my gosh, man. I mean, literally, I was tearing up
Yeah.
watching it.
So
It was
funny
incredible.
thing, one of my friends, his son was actually played the little boy in that video.
It was beautiful. It really was, and I think they did a couple of series of those where it was a similar kinda storyline, but yeah,
Yeah.
it was really sweet.
Everything they do
Um,
is just gold. So yeah, they are a huge inspiration to me. And it also helps that
well
I know them and they're local. So,
That's awesome. Well, I would love to speak with them. So I'll get your help, maybe trying to connect me with one of them, and then we can have one of them or multiples of them on the episode on the next episode. So
yeah,
that's awesome,
absolutely.
man. I appreciate you pointing me in their direction. Like I said, I've noticed them on social media recently. Not too long now that they've been on my radar. So shame on me for taking so long to get on the bandwagon
Yeah, well,
fan anyway, fandom stuff.
funny, I think so Aaron and I actually recorded a podcast with them that we have not released because we've been so busy. But they
Shame. Y'all need to get that out.
oh, I
I would
know,
watch
man.
it.
It's good. We're just sitting on it and we don't have time to edit. But they said on the podcast, they're like, we're really bad at social media. And I feel like I'm very bad at social media, but I have a suspicion that they just got a summer intern and that they're having their intern really ramp up their social media. So that's
Okay.
when you said that you had just started to notice them, I was like, I think that might be why.
Maybe so. I don't remember when I first noticed them. I have to look back at some of their social media and see what really caught my eye first with them. that caused me to start following them because I don't think I had followed them before, and it may have been somebody shared something else from theirs, but anyway, they've got some great stuff, so I look forward to seeing more of their stuff. All right, real quick, I do want to talk about these, this is really selfish of me why I brought this up. This middle photo, okay, this was off your website. Um, was there inspiration to this? Like, was there like a classic, I don't know, like a National Geographic photo or something that you were imitating with this, or is this just like a moment that you captured, sort of spur of the moment?
So this is one of the rare instances when I went into a portrait shoot with a very specific vision. So it's funny that you brought that up. This is one of my friends, which I know she's married. I don't know what she's doing now, but we went to high school together, and I think I was just in town for whatever it was. I believe this was like 2019, 2020. And I was like, hey, I have some ideas for portraits I want to do. Do you want to help out? And she was kind enough to help. But man, it really came, I don't know what I saw, but I loved the idea of just like filtering light through something. And I wanted to get a photo where like the pattern of light was just on someone's face. And so I had this really old, like just knit blanket, which like you can clearly see it
Yeah,
right there. And so
it's like a baby
yeah,
is what it reminds
we
me of a
did
little bit.
we did a lot of photos actually, but we were down on the Gulf Coast because that's where I grew up. So we're on the beach right there. You probably can't tell.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just had her throw up the blanket over her shoulder and the light was coming through just perfect and orange. And we took a few photos and I was just like, man, this is great. That is one of my favorite portraits I've taken. That girl, her name's Sarah. I don't know her new last name, but she killed it. She did an incredible job. Yeah, that was a really cool shoot.
Well, it's a beautiful photo, and that light pattern on her face really just I think the whole framing of it, even just the way that that blanket sort of creates the frame itself is just beautiful. And but I was telling Cole the other day whenever I was looking at this, I was like, I feel like there's like a National Geographic photo out there somewhere that this is like a direct, almost like imitation of, if that makes sense.
So it definitely,
Um,
I know what you're thinking of. It looks a little bit that I should know the name of this because the reason I am into photography is because of Nat Geo. Um, there's a famous photo of an Afghan girl with a scarf, and she has these beautiful green eyes, and
yes, yes.
it's one of the most famous photos in the world. And I forget the name of the photographer who took it, and I'm gonna kick myself over that. But
Well,
it's
that's the image that keeps popping up whenever I start searching to try to find what I think. But it's I don't think it's quite that, at least not in my mind. Because yeah, you're right. She's like wearing a headscarf, and so it's very similar kind of framing, but it doesn't have that like raised up blanket that sort of creates that light pattern. But anyway, I may just be it may be your image that is in my mind because I've seen this image, following you on social media. I've seen this image years ago, and then I see it now, whenever I started sort of preparing for this interview, and I was like, I've seen this framing before. And so it may be your own image that's in my mind thinking, oh, this is an imitation of like a master image. So in either case, props to you. I think it's a beautiful
well,
image,
that's
beautiful framing. Love the play with light.
it's very kind of you because
It's great.
the image you're comparing it to is much better than mine, so it's a very, very high badge of honor, so I'm grateful for that. But also, yeah, Sarah, the girl in the photo, I don't know if you've ever worked with people who actually know what to do with their face, like, when you take a photo of them,
Mm,
because 'cause I'm horrible. Any photo, I do the exact same thing. But I think Sarah had done some modeling, and, like, her expression just, like, I feel like almost tells a story, like, it draws you in, like, you wanna keep
I
looking at
agree.
it. So
I agree. It's a smile, but it's not too much of a smile, and it's not too little of a smile. It's welcoming and inviting without being like, whoa, a
yeah,
little bit.
yeah.
So yeah, and I think that's one of the things, the expression in a face, especially in a portrait, that the face is so much of the image. it definitely, the expression matters a lot, and I think she nailed it. But also, like I said, that light pattern nails it. I even like the fact that so much of it is in shadow. I think that that's something that I think I myself am very guilty of, boosting shadows too much, because I'm like, oh, I don't want to lose the detail in like the shoulder and neckline. But sometimes those things need to disappear into shadows to accentuate the light, and in this case, even that light coming through the blanket. So
So
I
I
would say props all around.
thank you. I've got actually a philosophy on that. I think whereas a lot of people will kind of call my edits like dark and moody, I I want to what's a good way to say this? I want to make the light matter. Um, you have the entire spectrum. So Ansel Adams developed, it's called the zone system. So you have every shade from absolute black to absolute white, and everything in between is a different shade of gray. And obviously that's for black and white, and this is color. But
Right.
I always want there to be one part of my edit that I'm like, this is the bright, like this is light, and like it matters that this is light. And then all the way at the end, you've got this is absolute black. And for me, like there are lots of other ways to edit, and that doesn't mean one is better than the other. I just like to take advantage of that full spectrum and have some things that are hidden and then some things that are very bright. And I think even the 3 photos you have up here, there are parts of each photo that is absolute white and absolute black. And I think that's something that I try to carry over with a lot of my photos.
Yeah. Well, these are beautiful photos. I love the play with motion that you've done a lot in some of these like concert photos. I'm one, most of mine is I wouldn't call it editorial kind of photography, but more so um, because the kind of content that I'm creating for my full time job is more editorial. And so for me, the artistic play with motion and even light that like the other two images have, it I enjoy watching and I enjoy seeing it. And it it really impressive with the stars on this one on the far side. Um, I'm assuming this was some low exposure,
Yeah, which
or low shutter speed.
my camera's yelling at me. It's got 5 minutes of power left, but I can power through.
Okay, all right, we're gonna wrap
Um,
up.
yeah, so I love photographing the night sky more than anything else, and it's not something I've been able to do in a long time just because of circumstance. You can't just go out in your backyard in Birmingham and shoot it. You've got to be in like a really good location where there's no light pollution. But this actually, so I shot this on the original A7S, and it got featured on the Sony Alpha account. And
Oh, that's awesome.
it's a 30-second exposure at like f2.8 on a 14 millimeter lens at probably ISO like 3200 or something. And all of my friends have gotten really good at just standing still for like 30 seconds because that's how this photo happened. Like I'd set everybody up, I'd press the timer, I'd run over there. I'm up on the fence. I'm the one immediately to the right of the guy holding the light.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, people commented on that photo when it got reposted, and they were like, "This is obviously Photoshop. The people would be blurry." And I was just like, "Well, no, my friends are good at standing still." So yeah,
That's funny.
there's nothing I love photographing more than the stars. I have multiple tattoos. Like this is a solar system. This is a comet. There. Let's see. Oh, I keep getting
Other way. There we go.
comet and then minimalist solar system. I have very basic white girl tattoos, but I just love space, and photographing the stars is one of the things that got me into photography in the first place. So, yeah.
Well, I props to you on the photo as well as to the guy holding the flashlight, because that sounds like that would be very painful. So, all right. We don't have time, but I know I love your Jeep. I love seeing your Jeep.
Thank you.
You love to show your Jeep. So props to the Jeep. And that's it, man, for this one. I really appreciate you coming on here and taking 2 hours of your time to talk with me. And I think that what you're doing with Tarabella Creative is awesome. What you've been doing, even when you were just traveling with your friends or whether you were shooting for the nonprofit you used to work for. I've been a fan of your work for a while now, and I look forward to seeing what you'll be creating in the future. If you ever do need a 40-year-old man with a wife and 4 kids and the dog, just holler.
Well, hey,
I'm here.
we'll throw you on a horse. We'll cover you in paint, whatever you want. You'll get the whole Tarabella creative experience. But no, thank you so much, Brian. I've really enjoyed talking with you. This is like I cannot believe it's been what, 2 hours, 15 minutes. Like, this has flown by. So yeah, I would gladly do this again. Thank you for having me on.
Oh, well, it's been a pleasure. Really has.